Randy Reed, editor of the Edison Report, and we are here at the Conversation Corner at NYControlled 2025 in New York City. I'm joined today by Scott Hendrickson of Eos Lightmedia, John Yriberri of Modular Lighting Instruments, and Amanda Lyon, also of Eos Lightmedia. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all for joining me. And this session is titled The Handshake, where designers, integrators, and manufacturers meet and win. So I think it's a great title, and personally I'm trying to learn more about the role of the integrator, as I think many in our audience are. So I guess the first question, John, I'll start with you. Where should an integrator be looped? When should an integrator be looped in, ideally?
I think it really depends on the type of project, commercial, residential, and the complexity of the overall controls. So if it's something like ELV dimming or line voltage dimming, and it's a bunch of downlights, yeah, maybe there's no integrator at all. Maybe it's just very straightforward. It's specifier, electrician, installed, and we're done.
And that's how most jobs are these days.
A lot of them are like that. And then there's those that are, individual addressable fixtures with advanced control systems, and there it really is so important to get those guys on early in the stage, because otherwise it can lead to all sorts of problems.
Amanda, do you agree?
Very much so. I think pretty much as soon as you realize you're going to have that level of complexity, it's time to at least start discussions with an integrator, because it becomes very easy to miss steps in the process, and there's gaps, and then when you come to the final product, things aren't communicating or working in the way that you anticipated.
Scott?
Yeah, I think if you're a lighting designer, it's good to have an integrator on speed dial just to ask questions. In that early phase, make sure you've got the control system correct, that you're going in the right direction, and just looping them in on the project at an early phase so that they can guide you wherever you may have a little bit of a weakness perhaps in what you like to do. If you're really strong in controls, you might not need them right away. And then on the flip side, on the build side, it's pretty important to get that integrator involved during those power and data coordination sets when you're coordinating with the EC, the GC, those base building trades, to make sure the conduit's in the right place and the right cables are pulled in the right direction. So those are sort of the 2 points.
So Amanda, I assume at least once in your career you have brought in an integrator too late. What happens in that case when they are brought in late to the game?
You just end up with systems that don't communicate well, and then you're struggling last minute to find solutions that are not optimal. You originally planned on communicating via one certain system. Something has gotten missed, and so you end up using a less precise system or a less controllable system to achieve the goal, but it's not ultimately what you had wanted out of it.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, it again, kind of depending on the type of job, if it's, let's say, a residential job, and the integrator is doing more than just lighting, when there's architectural details that have to be put in the framework, it may be not just that the functionality is not there, but a full feature set may not be able to actually be incorporated into the project. So an example of hiding shades behind some kind of valence or something, it becomes a lot more difficult. If that's not done up front, then it's pretty much not going to be done at all.
Okay, so Scott, what does a smooth collaboration look like?
I think when it comes to smooth collaboration, I think what's key for the team is, one, that the lighting designer and the integrator build a strong relationship. The integrator is there to protect the lighting design, so they need to have a really good way of communicating with each other. That really starts things off on the right foot. If they know how to talk to each other, the integrator really understands the design, that's where that collaboration gets really strong. And then when it comes to the integrator and the manufacturer, I think those are long-standing, years-long relationship where they understand the products, they understand how they come to market, how they get to the job site, and those relationships are really built over years to benefit both the designer and the end client.
Okay. add to that?
Yeah, if I could add to that, smooth collaboration from a manufacturer's standpoint is, not fighting fires at the end of the job and trying to find suboptimal solutions, like you mentioned, Amanda, earlier. When everything goes smoothly, you're involved early, the controlled narrative is defined, the zoning is defined. Sometimes that affects power drops and where power lines are being fed. And it's one that at the end of the day, you look back and you say, wow, that went really smooth. Versus at the end of the job saying, I don't know how we're going to maintain, make sure that the client gets what they want and what they paid for with where we're pigeonholed into this corner right now. I don't know how to do that. And everyone's trying to find a solution. Meanwhile, time keeps ticking and dollars keep.
All right. So, Scott, Amanda, let's talk about the business of lighting design. You talk about bringing them in early, having them on a speed dial. The first thing you do is you talk to the integrator. But when is the integrator when does the clock start ticking on the integrator being paid? So you're bidding a job, right? You hope to get that job. You've got to put a line item in for the integrator. Is that right? And then once you start your design, you're on the phone and that integrator is billing for his time. Is that correct? Or her time?
I think it really depends, right? So much like working with a manufacturer, not every time you pick up the phone to talk to the manufacturer do you get a bill after. A lot of the time...
Well, you usually never do when you talk to the manufacturer.
Right? So a lot of the time it's mostly...
I wish we could bill for that.
It's mostly about good advice, setting people up in the right direction. Now, if you're a lighting designer that's uncomfortable doing a control system design, you may hire an integrator to help write that control system, to do your single lines for you, and then you'd be paying them as a sub-consultant. But most of the way through the design process, you're just calling them, you're getting good free advice that's going to help the integrator do a good job on the other side.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So they have an incentive to work with you because once they do go on the site to do their job, they're going to know a whole lot more.
That's right. If we don't give that good advice early on and help steer a system that's going to be unified, then we're the ones untangling all the wires on site anyway. So it's better for us to invest that time in the design community, give them what they need early on, and then typically where we really start to get paid and where the clock turns on is when it goes to bid for integration.
Okay. I understand that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for explaining that. Okay. Where do roles and responsibilities sometimes blur, and how can they be clarified? Amanda, I'll start with you on that one.
I think sometimes they blur, especially on the specification end of things. Some designers, are more comfortable speccing and dealing with control systems. Some have very little, especially on more complex DMX, multi-universe kinds of systems. And so I think that's where it can blur. If you have a designer who's comfortable with that, the integrator it's a different relationship than with a designer who has less experience or less comfortable in speccing those kinds of systems.
Right. Okay. You want to add to that,
Yeah,
John?
I would agree with that. But maybe I look at it from a slightly different perspective. Is when do the lines not blur? I've seen documents that on the front page, on the cover page, have all those roles and responsibilities clearly defined up front. Mm-hmm. And then you clearly have that there's certain integrators that we've worked with also that they're part of their documentation package is regurgitating all those roles and responsibilities of, from the electrician to the integrator to the lighting designer to the contractor, electrician, manufacturer. And then it goes back to the previous question that's when things go very smoothly there is no finger pointing because everyone knows
What
whose
they're
job
supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for myself, the way I see those roles getting blurred is integrators are really knowledgeable about products. They're really knowledgeable about how systems come together, and sometimes they can overstep the role of the lighting designer. It's the lighting designer who creates the specification.
They overstep. So they want to specify what they want to use. Is that what you're...
They may have come across a situation where the fixture that's been specified they had a challenge with. Maybe they have a great idea. But if they come up with that great idea without going through the lighting designer first and communicating that in a collaborative way, that's not their role, right? It can be a benefit to the lighting designer if you share that and say, hey, in this particular instance, I would caution against or tell me your reasoning, working with them. But that's, I think, one place where integrators often misstep is using that knowledge a little too quickly, you know, and without going through the proper channels to say, I'm worried you may come up against this problem. How do you want to solve it together? And sort of jump that gun. I think that's where I see integrators maybe make, that's the most common mistake. And if you can avoid that, then you're going to keep your relationships intact, you're going to keep the design intact, and you're going to have a better result.
And like architects have favorite lighting designers that they work with, you have favorite integrators that you prefer to work with. Makes sense. Okay, John, as a manufacturer, from your perspective, what's the one thing the others often misunderstood about or misunderstand about your role?
I think they often misunderstand how committed we are to the end game of the project, the overall success. I think there's a lot of misconception that, hey, we're just going to provide the quote based on an RCP, and once it leaves our desk, it's someone else's problem. We are definitely committed that we want that success all the way through the project to the end where the client is getting exactly what they want. That way, if there's ever a referral or anything else, they're saying, yeah, this went great. Architect, great. You know, lighting designer, great. Manufacturer, great. I think that we're not bought into the whole project and that we don't want to see success. I'd say that's kind of the misconception from a manufacturer's perspective.
Okay, that you just want to get the check and get off the job.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, from a designer's perspective, what's one thing that your role is misunderstood the most?
I think one thing is that a lot of people don't think of controls as a design choice. It's a thing to execute the design you've made rather than another step in the design process. A lot of the decisions you're making about fixture choices, color temperature, any of that kind of thing is then only further enhanced by the controls and the way you use those in the system. And so I think too many people think of that as a step that somebody else kind of deals with, whereas I very much believe that that's the final part of my design.
Okay, Scott?
It's a good question. I'm not sure that integrators are misunderstood so much as maybe there's more that everyone can use an integrator for. There's a lot of knowledge keeping that integrators have in their role of executing a design, and I think there's a lot more that they can offer if you just ask. You know, whether that's on the manufacturing side, and I'll say a lot of people don't realize how many incredible engineering brains are at manufacturing firms to help you solve problems. I think that's the same thing with an integrator. Is there's all kinds of people. Whether it's in low voltage or in power sizing or in supply chain management, there's lots of things an integrator can help with, and often we're thought of more as an on-site trade, but we're really an end-to-end service provider. So I think if you can remember all of that, a great integrator, you can call 3 years after the job and they should pick up the phone and fix whatever problem is there.
Okay, so let's look at 10 years ago. In your profession, what percent of your jobs had controls 10 years ago versus what percent have them today? Ballpark.
I mean, I think 10 years ago it was a much smaller, because especially in the architectural world, I come from a theater background.
Okay.
This kind of control was mostly non-existent, and a lot of the technology wasn't there yet either to support color changing, the kind of granular control you can have over each fixture in a system. And so I would say it was, 10-20% of what you were doing was just figuring out how to turn the lights on and off, but everything else was a bigger part of the decision, whereas now the controls are a much larger part of the decision.
Scott, what would you say?
So a bit interesting for me, when I started in this profession 20 years ago, I was doing live concert design, so the controls were a big aspect of that, a lot of color changing lights. When I moved over to architectural work, common job, for us had one universe. Everything was fairly simple, fairly straightforward. Now I think our average job, the complexity of the profiles of all the fixtures and everything, the amount of different protocols we see, the fact that everything is moved to Ethernet and PoE protocol, the level of complexity I think has just skyrocketed over the last 10 years. Dealing with one protocol to 5 or 6 now, and from one universe to often 10, 20 on the average job.
Still more integrators used in residential lighting than architectural lighting. Is that fair to say?
I think the role of an integrator in residential lighting is pretty narrow. A lot of electrical contractors really understand how to deliver in a residential space, but if you have a particular maybe theater, something quite special that you're doing in your home, that's when you'll see an integrator come on board. But we really, for us at Eos Lightmedia, of the 400 projects maybe in our portfolio, I think 4 are houses. So it's about 1%.
Okay, John, closing comments.
Closing comments, just to add to that over there, we do a lot of residential work, and most of our residential work is luxury residential. So I'd say half of our business is luxury residential. Out of that luxury residential, probably 80-90% have an integrator.
Oh, wow.
Because these are luxury residences. So they're integrating more than just lights. There is, people used to call them, AV guys. And they don't like that term anymore. They like custom integrators, or CI, because they are doing a lot more than just audio video now.
And they were also called CEDIA.
CEDIA, yeah, a lot of people refer to them as CEDIA as well. But now their preference is CI, or custom integrators.
Okay.
And we see that their value, and their knowledge of lighting is going way up. And, we're getting involved more and more frequently with them. It's becoming a much more prevalent part of our business to be involved with integrators. And if you go to a show like Lightapalooza, the last couple of years or this coming year, you'll see how many lighting companies are there, and you can see that business is exploding. We like to be part of that just because, again, being part of that chain and being well connected, because oftentimes you still have a lighting designer on the job. It's not just the integrator doing all the work. You do have an integrator, but you do have a lighting designer, you do have an architect, and you do have an interior designer. And now coordinating that big bucket to get all work together, and not just lighting, but shades and security systems and everything else. It's really blowing up that side of the channel. It's very interesting.
Amanda, closing comment?
Just for designers to think about the fact that when you get the chance to work with an integrator, to take advantage of that relationship, learn about controls, learn what they can do to enhance your design, learn about new systems, learn about new fancy things that you might not ever get to use, but it might inspire something later down the line in your design.
Okay, excellent. Scott?
I think integrators have the privilege of working on a lot of projects, and so there's a lot of real world experience there, and I would just echo what Amanda is saying, is leverage that real world experience, ask a lot of questions, get them to look around the corners for you, get them to recommend strategies, pitfalls, and use that to your advantage, because at the end of the day, they're going to come across it either at the finish line or closer to the start, and that's a relationship you want to use. That advantage of the real world experience that they have.
Okay, guys. Thank you very much.
Great.
I learned a lot.
Cheers.
Thank you.
A pleasure. Thank you.